Hello, welcome to the Ackman and Ziff Family Genealogy Institute at the Center for Jewish History. I'm J.D. Arden, and I'm a reference and genealogy librarian here at the center. Today, we will hear from genealogy researcher Jessica Dubin. When did you come to CJH to start your research?
It was in May. My boyfriend works here, and he knew that I have some, mysterious family history that I don't know about. We've always thought that we might be Jewish, we might be Eastern European, but we never had any proof because my great-grandfather ran away from home and never spoke about his family. So my boyfriend, he suggested that I come here and use the genealogy archives or library to do a little research. So that was in May. Before I came, I called my grandmother. This is, my dad's mom, who isn't, she's Puerto Rican and she doesn't have, she knows her family.
Right.
She knows it very well. But she was able to give me information about my grandfather and his father. So it was my grandfather's father, my great-grandfather on my dad's side, who ran away from home probably when he was like a teenager and never spoke about the family. So it was this, mysterious mystery thing or whatever. And so I called my Nana and I asked her if she had any information. And she was able to give me very few, but some bits and pieces about my great-grandfather, whose name was Earl Dubin. And she was able to say, she knew his birth date and his, the day he died, his date of death. And she also knew the town that he was from. And she had a letter from another Dubin, also from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that they had received years and years ago. And so from that, she was able to give me a few scraps of information, and that's kind of what I went off of when I came here. So
where did you use that information to look up more records?
I started with Ancestry first because Jewish Gen is an amazing database, but you need to have some more detailed information to use it, and I didn't have very many details. So I started with Ancestry, and one of the first things that I found, I typed in Abraham Dubin, which was my great-great-grandfather's name, and I think I typed in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I think that was really all the information I had on this man, and I found a grave on the Find a Grave site that was through Ancestry, and I found his grave, and it was in a Jewish cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first thing that was like, aha, moment, to say, yes, you are Jewish, or you have Jewish ancestry or a background, and this is the person that you're looking for. And then the next thing that I found, again, most of the research I did was on Ancestry. The next thing that I found were U.S. Census reports from, I think I found them from 1910 all the way through 1950 or maybe 40, when the family was still mostly together until my great-grandfather, Earl, ran away from home. So I could see my great-grandfather's name, and it was the correct date of birth, so then that verified who this guy Abraham Dubin was, and then that solidified or verified that grave that I found. Something that I wanted to make sure of because I was so excited to find this information. I didn't want to just be like, oh yeah, sure, they have the same name and they're sort of from the same area. I didn't want to just guess or just assume that these were the correct people I was finding. So I tried really hard to find other data or other pieces of information that would verify what I was finding. So I found a lot of information. So in the census, something that was really cool was, so the census lists the whole family, right? And I didn't know anything about my great-grandfather. I never met him. I'd seen a picture of him once or twice, and he never talked about his family, so nobody else ever talked about the family. And we just kind of, left it that mystery. But I found out, again, the census listed his mom, his dad, and it turns out a brother and a sister that nobody knew existed.
Nobody knew about,
yeah. And it's like you find a whole family, and I think the census was really cool because it goes every 10 or 5 years, and depending on like whether it's state or federal or whatever, but you can see a lot even in just those few lines of people's lives. You can see obviously what age they are, but then it tells you the occupation, where they're living. So you could see like when they moved around, and then when Abraham, again, the great-great-grandfather, like when he changed occupations, he went from like tailor to storekeeper to then he was like a homeowner. So I got to know this man through just like a piece of into like a line of information, a person that I barely knew even existed. And then I also, again, so I found out that there was a brother and a sister, Minnie but there were two, it was Albert, I think, or Talbert, Minnie and Talbert. I got to hear about I got to learn about their life. So like Minnie, I found a record that she was the middle sister. She ran away to get married because I found a marriage thing for her that was like in Michigan, and she did not. I found her grave as well. She wasn't buried in a Jewish cemetery. So I was like, oh, you ran away from home. You left the religion. Like you kind of, cut yourself off from the family. And Talbert, actually, his kids, he had a son who died in, I think it was World War II. I thought Talbert got married and only had one son, and that son died in a war. And the son also was buried in like a Christian cemetery. Like he had like a cross on his grave. So again, I think the family left a lot of the religion behind as the generations went on. And we, so you find out all this information. So my dad lives outside of Washington, D.C. and is only a few hours away from Harrisburg. So he drove over there to find these graves. I had a couple of addresses for him. So one of the first things he did is he went to this one address where it seemed that they lived, again, according to the census, that they lived for a long time. My dad took some pictures in front of the house. He went to I don't think he went to the cemetery that first time because he couldn't find it, but he went to the local synagogue and asked about the family, and actually they had some information, and it turns out that Talbert, who is the youngest brother, had a second son that I couldn't find in my research. I only saw the first son, but apparently he had a second son who is still alive, and this guy, his name is Martin, and that is who my dad, they contacted Martin, who then contacted my dad.
The synagogue contacted
the cousin,
Uh-huh.
who he lives outside of Harrisburg now. I don't think he lives in the city. But they still had some contact information on him. So maybe through the cemetery as well, like whoever keeps the graves. And so they contacted Martin and said, hey, I think there's a distant relative of yours who's looking. And so we've now been in contact with this guy, Martin. So all of this happened through May, just a few months ago, and into June. And through that, Martin started sending us pictures of all of these relatives that I had just discovered existed. So you're able to see, I felt like I got to know Abraham, my great-great-grandfather. I feel like I really got to know him really well because he was the person who, he came over from Russia, which was the Russian Empire back then. This is like the late 1800s, I think he came over. I don't have like a ship manifest. I wasn't able to find that, unfortunately. So again, I still don't know exactly which town he came from or which country. So I wasn't able to do even further research into like if there's family, if we have, distant relatives over in like Eastern Europe somewhere. But I felt like I got to know Abraham anyways. I got to like see his life, see how his children like left him, and like how he changed careers and all that stuff. So when Martin provided us a picture of him, it was such an amazing moment to see this man that I felt like I knew and who's an ancestor of mine, essentially. And I was able to compile a little book of pictures for my grandparents' 60th anniversary. And that's kind of what got me started in the first place is, again, it was this family mystery. Who are these people? We find them, we get pictures, and then I was able to give that to my grandfather.
What was that like for him? What did he say?
It's interesting. He was a little taken aback by it at first because his whole life, all he had heard from his father about this family was like, no, they're bad. We don't talk about them. And I don't know what the dispute was. It was more than likely, it was probably about religion or faith or something. And so for my grandfather to all of a sudden have his granddaughter come up and be like, hey, guess what? You've got like living relatives, and don't you want to like, hear about them? He was a little hesitant at first, actually, because in his mind, he wanted to respect his father's wishes of not talking about it and kind of leaving well enough alone, essentially. But we spoke with him about it, and I think after he thought about it, and we shared with him a letter from his dad, so again, from my great-grandfather, that he wrote to his mother about, like, and he mentions my grandfather, and he says, I have a son now. This is like the estranged son writing to his mom, basically, and talking about, like, you have a grandson, his name is Earl, like, and I think he even actually shared a picture. And this was Martin. Martin kept this letter. This cousin kept this letter and then shared it with us. We shared it with my grandfather, and I think that really broke down a lot of barriers. He was able to see how his dad maybe was trying to start to reconcile a little bit. I don't know how far that went, but it seemed like they did keep in some contact. And so actually my grandfather ended up speaking with Martin, with his first cousin, this man he never knew existed. So they did speak over the phone, actually, and just said hello. I don't think there was a whole lot, that happened, but just to talk. And we didn't know that we have this family over here. And I think Martin, this man in Pennsylvania, thought he was the last of his line. Like, he thought he was the last Dubin or whatever his last name is. And so all of a sudden now we have family, and so does Martin. Martin, like, has a whole bunch of relatives that he didn't know, and it's really interesting to be able to find that information out. I always kind of it's always, because of the mystery, it was always like, ooh, yeah, like maybe we have some like really cool past or something like that. And to find out that you kind of do is I never thought that would be like the way it is. We always thought maybe we had some Eastern European, again, the last name Dubin, Dubinsky or Dubinskaya, like it, lends itself to that. But I first went to Russia when I was actually in 9th grade in high school, like right after 9th grade. And then I went back my junior year of high school as an exchange student, and then studied Russian in college, and did some Jewish studies classes as well, all without really knowing that this actually is my background. I did it simply because, I don't know, I thought it was interesting, but I never really understood why. And so coming across all this information, it's like, oh, that makes so much more sense now. Like, I was kind of tapping into my heritage and my culture without even knowing that it was my heritage and culture. Like, that doesn't happen every day. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Thanks to Jessica Dubin for sharing her story. To learn more about the Genealogy Institute at the Center for Jewish History, find our webpage, genealogy.cjh.org, or check out the Facebook page, facebook.com/Center for Jewish History. We are a not-for-profit research institution providing the public with free access to a vast number of resources. We also offer membership programs that include workshops, consultations, and a DNA test kit. Here at the Center for Jewish History, where history is a current event.